Have you ever noticed that the moment you stop reaching out, everything suddenly becomes quiet? No texts, no effort, just silence. And at first, it feels a little unsettling, but this is often the exact point where clarity starts to appear. When you pull back and he also doesn't reach out, something real begins to surface. It's not about games or control, it's about honesty showing itself. Without your constant effort holding the connection together, you can finally see what he naturally chooses to do. Silence exposes true intention. A man who genuinely values you will feel your absence and move closer. A man who doesn't will simply remain where he is. That is why stepping back holds power. It allows reality to reveal itself instead of forcing connection through effort or overthinking. Silence is often misunderstood, especially in the early or uncertain stages of getting to know someone. When a man goes quiet after you stop initiating, the first reaction is usually emotional. You start assuming he has lost interest, something went wrong, or you pushed him away. But silence is not automatically rejection, it is information. When communication stops, what remains is something raw and unfiltered. Before that, your effort may have been carrying the interaction, starting conversations, maintaining momentum, filling emotional space. That can easily hide his real level of interest. But once you step back, the dynamic is no longer shaped by you. What follows shows his genuine willingness to stay connected. Silence becomes evidence, revealing what words often fail to show. This is where many people go wrong. They respond to silence emotionally, instead of observing it objectively. Rather than letting things unfold, they try to fix the gap immediately, sending another message, restarting conversation, or looking for reassurance. In doing so, they interrupt the very process that could have brought clarity. What was starting to reveal truth turns back into confusion. Understanding silence correctly requires discipline. It means resisting the urge to react instantly and allowing space for reality to unfold on its own. It also means being willing to accept what it reveals, even if it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it shows low interest, and other times it creates space for someone to finally step forward and prove themselves. There is also power in realizing that silence is not only about him, it is also about you. The way you respond to quiet moments reflects your self-worth. If silence makes you anxious and pushes you to chase, it can lead you into patterns where you overgive and undervalue yourself. But if you can sit with it calmly and confidently, you completely shift the dynamic. You stop trying to secure attention and start observing whether it is freely given. Silence clears everything. It removes mixed signals, overthinking, and emotional noise. It answers the question you are often afraid to ask: what happens if I stop trying? And whatever the answer is, it becomes valuable information. Because the right person will not let silence create distance. They will use it as a reason to come closer. When you stop chasing, your true level of interest becomes visible through actions, not words. When you stop chasing, something powerful becomes clear, what he actually chooses to do without being pushed. That's the moment attention starts turning into real intention. A man who is genuinely interested doesn't need constant prompting, even if he isn't perfectly consistent at the start. There is still a natural pull toward you. He thinks about you, feels drawn in, and eventually responds to that feeling. By stepping back, you allow space for him to either move closer or remain where he is, and both outcomes give you truth. If he comes closer, you gain confirmation that the connection is mutual. If he doesn't, you stop investing in potential and start seeing reality. What once felt like uncertainty becomes clear, and your mindset shifts from trying to keep someone interested to recognizing whether they are truly investing in you. Emotional self-control plays a major role in how you experience connection. It doesn't mean ignoring your feelings, but it does mean not letting them dictate your actions. When communication feels unclear or inconsistent, the instinct is often urgency, wanting reassurance, answers, or immediate clarity. But reacting too quickly by double texting or trying to fix the distance usually comes from anxiety, not intention. Self-control creates space between what you feel and what you do, allowing you to observe instead of react. In that space, you begin to notice patterns rather than panic over isolated moments. Not every silence is rejection, and not every delay carries a negative meaning. Staying calm allows the situation to unfold naturally, and that calmness reflects confidence, self-respect, and emotional stability that doesn't depend on instant validation. This approach changes the entire way you handle relationships. Instead of chasing or overextending yourself, you start focusing on how you respond rather than trying to control someone else's behavior. Communication becomes more intentional, guided by clarity instead of fear or urgency. You begin to understand that real connection doesn't survive through pressure, but through mutual effort and consistency. When you stop trying to manage outcomes, you also stop living in a constant state of anxiety, waiting for the next message or sign. That emotional steadiness becomes noticeable and often more attractive than constant availability. You are no longer managing someone's actions, you are managing your own responses. This is where self-worth becomes visible in how you show up. You stay grounded, protect your energy, and only invest where effort is genuinely returned, creating healthier and more balanced connections. Words can feel incredibly convincing in the early stages of a connection. A man may tell you he likes you, that he misses you, that he's just busy, or that he wants to see where things go. And in the moment, those words can feel reassuring, but words alone don't always reflect what's actually real. That's why how he responds to distance becomes far more meaningful than anything he says, because actions, especially when there's space between you, reveal intention without filters. When things are going smoothly and communication is constant, it's easy for someone to maintain a certain image. The energy feels mutual, conversations flow, and everything seems to be moving forward. But the real test comes when that rhythm is interrupted. When distance appears naturally, or when you step back, the dynamic changes. There's no immediate interaction to rely on, no constant validation, and no pressure to keep up appearances. In that space, what he chooses to do tells you everything. A man who is genuinely interested won't simply disappear. He may not be perfect or perfectly consistent, but there will be effort. He will reach out, check in, or try to reconnect because he genuinely wants to, not because he is being pushed to. That desire to re-engage is what separates real interest from casual attention. When words and actions don't align, distance exposes the gap. Someone can say all the right things, but if they don't move towards you when the opportunity is there, it reveals priority. People naturally make time and effort for what matters to them. Life can be busy, yes, but a consistent lack of effort over time is rarely just coincidence. And this is where many people get stuck. They hold on to what was said instead of paying attention to what is being done. They replay conversations, analyze messages, and hold on to promises that are not being matched by behavior. But words are easy. They don't require consistency or follow through. Actions do. Distance cuts through that confusion. It removes the noise of constant communication and leaves you with something much clearer: behavior. Does he step forward or stay still? Does he make an effort or let things fade? These answers don't need interpretation. They reveal themselves through what actually happens. This isn't about expecting perfection. Everyone has moments of inconsistency, but there's a difference between occasional imperfection and a repeated pattern of inaction. When someone truly cares, their presence may not always be flawless, but it will be felt. You won't be left constantly questioning where you stand. Learning to trust actions over words requires a shift in mindset. It means choosing clarity over comfort and being honest with yourself about what you're actually experiencing instead of what you hope is true. A man's response to distance often gives you the clearest insight into his level of interest, and that clarity protects your time, your energy, and your emotional investment. At its core, this is not about tactics, timing, or psychological games. It's about self-worth, and this is where many people lose themselves. They become so focused on what to do next, when to text, how long to wait, what to say, that they forget to ask a more important question: am I valuing myself in this dynamic? When dating becomes strategy, it leads to overthinking and emotional adjustment based on someone else's reactions. But real connection is never built through calculation. It grows from authenticity and mutual respect. Self-worth completely changes your focus. Instead of constantly wondering, how do I keep him interested? You start asking a more important question: is he actually showing up in a way that matches what I deserve? That shift is powerful because it brings your emotional energy back under your control. You're no longer chasing reassurance or trying to secure someone's attention. You're simply observing consistency, effort, and respect. When you truly understand your value, you don't feel the need to convince anyone to choose you. You don't overextend yourself, you don't over-explain, and you don't compensate for someone else's lack of effort. You realize that the right person won't leave you carrying the connection alone. They will meet you halfway. And if they don't, stepping back stops being a strategy and becomes a boundary. This is also why the idea of playing games is misleading. Games are based on control. trying to trigger reactions, create uncertainty, or manipulate outcomes. But self-worth doesn't operate that way. It is calm, steady, and grounded. It doesn't try to control anyone's behavior. It simply decides what it will accept and what it won't. When you live from that place, everything becomes more natural. You communicate because you want to, not because you're afraid of losing someone. You give attention freely, but you also recognize that it should be returned. And most importantly, you stop fearing silence or distance because your value is no longer dependent on constant reassurance. There's a deep sense of peace that comes with this mindset. You stop feeling like you're competing for someone's attention or trying to prove your worth. Instead, you allow connections to develop naturally. If someone steps forward, you respond with openness. If they don't, you don't chase. You simply move on with clarity. That doesn't mean you never feel disappointment, but even that feeling changes. It's no longer tied to insecurity or self-doubt. It becomes a simple recognition that the connection wasn't aligned. The real truth is that the goal was never to win someone over. It was to not lose yourself in the process. It's about staying grounded in your own value even when things feel uncertain. Because when you do that, you naturally attract people who recognize your worth while also filtering out those who don't. In the end, everything comes back to clarity. When you stop reaching out, when silence shows up, and when you choose not to chase, you're not losing control. You're finally seeing reality without distortion. Their actions, your responses, and the space between you start revealing the truth of the connection. And that's where real power lies, not in strategy or timing, but in your ability to stay centered and let things unfold as they are. Because the right person won't be confused by your silence. They'll be moved by it. They'll notice your absence, value your presence, and choose to close the distance. And if they don't, that is still clarity. Not a reflection of your worth, but a direction towards something more aligned. When you look at early connections, a lot of confusion comes from how strong feelings are compared to how little evidence there actually is. You can feel a real emotional pull towards someone very quickly, but at the same time, their behavior may not have fully caught up to that level of emotional investment. That gap is where overthinking usually starts. Your mind tries to fill in uncertainty with assumptions, and small actions or delays start to feel much bigger than they are. Stepping back from communication interrupts that cycle. When you stop initiating and the pace naturally slows down, you remove your influence from the dynamic. What's left is simply what the other person chooses to do without being prompted. If there is genuine interest, it usually doesn't disappear in that space. It shows up in small efforts to reconnect, even if they are not perfectly timed or perfectly expressed. The key point is that there is movement toward you, not just presence when you are doing all the work. When that movement doesn't happen, it becomes clarity. Not a judgment, just information about how much effort they are willing to put in without being carried by your energy. This is where emotional attachment often clashes with reality. Attachment holds on to potential, replaying good moments and hoping things will change. Awareness focuses more on consistency over time. It asks whether effort is mutual, not whether the connection feels good in isolated moments. There is also a noticeable internal shift when you stop over-investing in someone's response. Your attention stops being reactive. You're not constantly checking your phone, rereading messages, or adjusting your mood based on whether they replied. That space creates more emotional stability, and with that stability comes better judgment. You start to see patterns more clearly instead of reacting to single moments. From that place, interest becomes something you observe rather than chase. You're no longer trying to maintain someone's attention through constant effort. You're simply noticing whether it exists on both sides. If someone is consistent, you naturally stay engaged. If they are not, you don't need to force a conclusion. You just adjust your level of investment accordingly. It's also important to keep this grounded in reality. Silence doesn't always mean lack of interest, and communication styles vary from person to person. Some people are slower, more inconsistent, or less expressive, even when they do care. The difference shows over time, not in a single moment. What matters is the overall pattern of effort, not one situation or one delay. In the end, it always comes back to where your energy is going. When most of it is focused on trying to secure someone's attention, the connection starts to feel unstable. When your energy is balanced and directed by self-respect, you naturally stop overextending yourself. You stay open, but you don't chase. You allow space, but you also observe what fills it. So instead of fearing silence, learn to trust it. Because in that quiet space, you don't just discover their intention, you return to your own value, and that is what truly changes everything.